So the passage this morning opens with some Pharisees and scribes, religious teachers, coming from Jerusalem to see Jesus. Now at this point in the Gospel of Mark, there's no mention that he himself has been to Jerusalem. He has been traveling all over Galilee and all kinds of towns, healing and spreading his message. And somehow, the people in Jerusalem have heard of it, and they have come. Now, just so you understand a little bit about the Pharisees and different sects of Judaism at that time, the temple was understood as the center of worship. It held the Ark of the Covenant. It was a secret room that only priests could go in. And the religious leaders most connected to the temple were the Sadducees. And the Essenes had connection with them also. The Pharisees were sort of, they were like Martin Luther nailing his theses on the Catholic door, saying religion isn't just for these set-apart people. Religion is for everyone. The laws are for everyone. So they were somewhat of a reformist tradition, right? They believed that everyone should know the law and should follow the law and thereby participate in the holiness of the law. So I'm wondering what they had heard about Jesus and why they went. Did they think maybe he would be helpful to their cause? Because he was also one trying to bring faith to the people. Now, the Gospel of Mark was written, the first Gospel written, and it was written right after the destruction of the temple. So at the end of this civil war, people trying to fight against the Roman oppression, and Rome just squashed them, destroyed their temple, and scattered them everywhere. So this was a really raw time, and people were really struggling to understand what it meant to be a Jew going forward without the temple. So the sects of Judaism that were connected to the temple, the Sadducees and the Essenes, there was no purpose for them anymore. Half the laws of Deuteronomy were irrelevant now that there was no temple, because so much of the law was about how to do these practices correctly, how to worship correctly, and all that was gone. So what was remaining in the time of Mark that he was writing was two sort of competing sects of Judaism. One was the Pharisees, and the other was the followers of Jesus. They were sort of in competition about who was going to lead the way for Judaism going forward. So we have this gospel that's written in hindsight, looking back at these conversations between Jesus and the Pharisees at a time when they were against the Pharisees. So I don't know how much Mark's state of mind influenced how he talked about Jesus relating to the Pharisees. Could have been some influence, right? Because Mark tells us in this passage that Jesus was quite condemning. Did you listen well to that? He was like, you phonies. Your heart is far from God. You're just going through the motions. This is just a rote practice for you. And these are people I'm assuming he has not ever met. And all they do is they ask him, we have this age-old tradition of washing our hands. We notice some of your disciples aren't doing it. Again, maybe they're trying to suss him out. Can they work together? Right? And if you can help me understand why they don't do this practice that seems so valuable to us, maybe we can get somewhere. But Mark has Jesus slamming them back. Right? You are fakes. He emphasizes, so Mark emphasizes Jesus' teaching, which is not against religious or ritual practices, but it's against the idolization of them, right? He's saying, you're doing these practices, they're not what's important. Look at what the finger is pointing to, not the finger. The rituals and the practices are meant to lead you closer to God, so don't get stuck there. Keep moving, right? That was Jesus' message. He starts to say it's not about what goes into you, but what comes out of your heart is what's defiling. And then he lists this quite a wicked assortment, right? And I wonder again, does Mark want us to make the leap and connect these things with the hearts of these Pharisees? When Jesus gives this list, is he saying, don't be like them with their wicked hearts, with their greed, with their lust? Right? Is it a message to Mark's followers? Don't follow those Pharisees. They are full of it. Stay away from them. Now again, there might be some distortion by the gospel writer Mark, but what he's teaching, what Jesus is teaching in this passage still holds so much truth and wisdom. Yes? Especially when we apply it to our own hearts. Not so much when we're making guesses and judgments about what's going on in the hearts of others. Jesus' words are meant for us to turn them inwards, to examine our own hearts. He talks about the vile things coming from our hearts. And it got me wondering, how did they get there? How do our hearts get filled? Whether it's with vile things or with wonderful things. How do our hearts get filled? And I invite you to call something out if it strikes you. Because I don't really have the answers.
Advertising.
Advertising might fill your heart. Yes, what the heart is exposed to, what your eyes and your mind are exposed to. Your upbringing. Yes. Right. What do you see? Again, what you're exposed to. You're exposed to love and kindness, or you're exposed to judgment and harshness. That's going to fill our hearts one way or the other. Others?
The beauty of the natural world.
The beauty of the natural world will fill our hearts. Church might fill our hearts. Prayer might fill our hearts. Now we think of the heart as a center of feeling, but Jesus in his list includes thoughts and deeds, right? So he's talking about a heart as sort of a wholeness, the wholeness of who a person is and what he or she does. He talks about your heart is far from God. And again, I wonder, what does that mean? Or what does it mean to have a heart that's close to God? You don't have to have an answer, just something. Sorry? God is your heart, even when it's filled with vile things?
No, but that's when he speaks to you.
That's how God will speak to you, through your heart. Yes, yes. I couldn't help but think about all the talk we had about bread and food and eating and taking in. And isn't it true that what fills our hearts is sort of what we take in, what we expose ourselves to. Some things we don't have control over what we're exposed to, but other things we do. We might think about the books we read, the movies we watch, the songs we listen to, the people we surround ourselves with. Right? All those things will influence us. It will fill our hearts either with fear or with faith. We'll be able to go deeper, or we'll be encouraged to stay in a shallow place. We'll expose our hearts to truth or to lies. We'll fill them with love or with suspicion and fear. Right? And so, James, back in his letter, says we can't control the tongue. Is that another way of saying we can't control our hearts? But Jesus here, obviously, he's telling his followers a message. You have some say over this. How do we purify our hearts? How do we bring our hearts closer to God? The first step is to search them. Search our own hearts. Take an honest assessment about what is in there. Pay attention to yourself and your reactions. Not just what you do, but what you want to do. How you're feeling. Not with a club to beat yourself up, because again, think of the way of Jesus is gentler than that. But to be honest with yourself about where there are resentments, where you're envious, where you're furious, where you feel you've been taken advantage of, where you have self-pity. Examine your own hearts for this stuff. And then what? Refrain. You can offer it up to God, but it's also important to notice the blessings in your heart, where they are filled with the love of God, where you have shown compassion and kindness, where you've been respectful to someone, where you've been able to put yourself behind someone else's needs, because that's in there too. You have hearts that were created by God and are filled with Jesus. Look for the good stuff. I always say what you focus on grows. So focus on those good things. Let them nudge the vile things out. Let them slowly start to replace the things that take you further away from God. You can always pray, study, find the positive things. Take a break from Facebook. Right? Especially we have an election coming up. We have primaries on Tuesday, which I'm going to lift up in prayer. But I invite you to bring your hearts with you to the voting polls. Let them be close to God as you fill out that box. Let the principles of Christ guide you in your decision making. Now, I am assuming that you want to have a heart that is close to God. But I tell you, friends, it's risky. And you may not want to. I'm going to finish with this quote from David Lose. He's talking about scripture, but I'm applying it to opening your heart to God. Opening your heart to God can be hazardous to your wealth, to your reputation, to your safety and security. People whose hearts are pure and filled with God's truth and love and peace, well, you know what? They've been known to make peace with their enemies. They have been known to give away their wealth and even their security for the sake of others. They've been known to change careers or stay where they are in order to respond more fully to God's call. They have been known to put their reputations and even their lives on the line by taking a stand for justice. Are you willing to take the risk? May it be so.